Hi, my current project is making 6 open-sided boxes out of plywood for seating in the rec room of our church. The boxes are pretty simple. There's 4 sides, 15 inches by 23 inches, and a top that's 23 inches square. In order to make the boxes strong enough for seating, and to make them look a little cooler, I decided that I would join the corners with finger joints. However, the sides are a little too big to safely use my finger joint jig on my table saw, and they're a little too wide to put into my dovetail jig. So I have to make a whole new jig that uses a handheld router to cut the joints. This is how I did it.
These 2 pieces of plywood from my scrap bin will make up most of the jig. And here's my router. I've installed a 3/8 inch straight bit and a 1/2 inch guide bushing. I want the finger joints to be 1 inch wide, so accounting for the 1/8 inch difference between bit and bushing, I lay out a 1 1/8 inch slot on the top piece. The jig I'm making is a simplified version of a fully adjustable one I found online. It was a little pricey, and not knowing if I would ever do finger joints at this scale again, I decided to use this very rough, shop-made version. Next, I lay out the location of the fence. It's perpendicular to the slot, and overlapping the back of the slot by at least half the width of the bushing. With the jig clamped to a test piece of plywood, I make a cut. I'm nibbling away a little material in several passes rather than one large cut through the board. That would stress the bit and the router. Because the fence overlaps the slot, a recess is cut into the fence the same width as the cut in the board. I cut a scrap piece of hardwood to fit in the slot. That piece is cut into 2 small pieces. One will form the follower and the other a spacer. It's hard to see, but the spacer is flush to the edge of the slot in the fence. I then use that to locate the follower. With the follower screwed in place, I drop it into the slot of the test piece and continue cutting slots across the board, moving the jig for each cut. And then I repeat the process on another test piece. A test of the joint shows it to be a little tight. If it was loose, I would have to move the follower closer to the slot, but in this case I fine-tuned the fit the old-fashioned way. It just takes a little filing for the joint to fit. With the jig dialed in as much as it ever will be, I start cutting the corners of the boxes. When the first side of the joint is cut, I have to establish where to start the first cut of the opposing side. It's probable that there is a more sophisticated way to do this, but this isn't a sophisticated jig or operator. With the starting point established, I just continue to cut across the board, completing the joint. After gluing up a couple of these boxes, I found it was easier and a little less frantic to glue up two sides and establish a square corner first. Then when the glue had cured, I would finish gluing up the other three corners. The next step was to flush cut the fingers of the joint. And round over the corners. Using another shop-made jig, I cut slots in two sides for handles. I forgot to film it, but the edges of the slots were also rounded over. These strips will provide some extra surface area to glue and screw the tops on. As you can see, the top is a little larger than the sides, so I can trim it flush with a router. I also round over the edges. After these blocks are installed in the corners, I can nail in some store-bought slider pads. And after a few coats of polyurethane, they're done. All 6 of them. Thanks for watching.